And I got a call from a man named Harold Bredesen. And he said, Dale.
For decades, Dale Evans and Roy Rogers were known as one of Hollywood's happiest couples. They built a family, shared the screen, and became two of America's most beloved Western stars. But behind that perfect public image, Dale carried feelings she rarely talked about. There were painful disagreements, years of frustration, and things about Roy that Dale simply could not forget. And some of what came out later changed how people viewed their famous marriage. So, what really happened between Dale Evans and Roy Rogers? Join us as we uncover the complicated truth behind the relationship that America thought it knew. The life Dale Evans was forced to hide. Before America knew her as Dale Evans, she was Frances Octavia Smith, born on October 31, 1912, in Uvalde, Texas. Her early life was far removed from the glamorous world she would eventually enter. She spent much of her childhood living with her uncle, Dr. Elad Massey, in Arkansas. Although she had a place to live, her childhood was marked by loneliness and a lack of the family warmth she wanted. That loneliness became more serious as she grew older. At only 14, Frances ran away and secretly married a man named Thomas F. Fox. The marriage happened when she was still a child herself, and her life changed very quickly. At 15, she became a mother to a son, Thomas F. Fox Jr., who was later known as Tommy. Then, when Frances was only 16, her husband left. She was suddenly a teenage mother, raising a young child on her own. She had little money, no established career, and very few people she could depend on, but she refused to give up. Instead, she turned to the one thing she had always been able to do well: music. Frances began singing and playing piano at radio stations in Memphis, including WMC and REC. At first, this was not about becoming famous. She needed an income, and music gave her a way to support Tommy. Every performance and every paycheck helped her provide for her son. Her work in radio eventually took her to Louisville, Kentucky. There, a station manager decided that Frances Octavia Smith was too long for a radio personality. He suggested the name Dale Evans. The new name marked the beginning of a new chapter. Dale's voice quickly attracted attention, and her radio career began moving forward. She developed a reputation as a talented singer and entertainer, eventually catching the attention of Hollywood. But becoming a movie star was not as simple as getting a contract and appearing on screen. Dale was a single mother, and during the 1930s and 1940s, Hollywood had strict ideas about how a female star was supposed to look and behave. Studios wanted their leading women to appear young, respectable, and free from anything that might damage their public image. Being a teenage mother was something Hollywood executives believed could hurt Dale's career. The solution they came up with was painful. Tommy would not be introduced publicly as Dale's son. Instead, he would be presented as her younger brother. For Dale, this was not just a small change to her biography. Tommy was the child she had raised since she was 15. He was the reason she had worked long hours in radio and pushed herself forward when she had almost nothing. Yet now, the industry that was giving her a chance at stardom was asking her to hide the most important part of her personal life. Dale went along with it because refusing could have put her career at risk. She had spent years trying to build a secure life for herself and Tommy, and Hollywood offered an opportunity she could not easily walk away from. So she appeared in public and interviews while maintaining the story that Tommy was her brother. The emotional cost was enormous. Every time someone asked about Tommy, Dale had to avoid the truth. The woman who had fought to raise him was not allowed to openly say that she was his mother. She had already experienced abandonment as a teenager, and now she faced another painful loss of control over her own family story. Eventually, Dale would become one of America's most recognizable entertainers. But beneath that success remained the memory of a time when Hollywood had forced her to choose between protecting her career and openly acknowledging her own son. And that old wound would matter even more once Roy Rogers entered her life. Roy Rogers entered her life. By the time Dale Evans reached Hollywood, she had already lived through more than most people experience in a lifetime. She had become a mother as a teenager, raised her son largely on her own, built a career in radio, and fought her way into the movie business. In 1944, that career took an important turn when she appeared alongside Roy Rogers in The Cowboy and The Senorita. Roy was already a major star. Known as the King of the Cowboys, he had become one of the most recognizable Western performers in America. His film, singing, writing skills, and clean public image made him a favorite with families across the country. He was not simply another actor working in Western movies. By this point, Roy Rogers was a major Hollywood name. Dale and Roy's relationship at first was professional. They were co-stars doing their jobs, working on films and spending time together on sets. Neither one could have known that their partnership would eventually become one of the most famous marriages in entertainment history. But Roy's personal life was changing in a painful way. Before Dale became his wife, Roy had been married to Arlene Wilkins. The couple had children together, and in 1946, Arlene gave birth to their son, Roy Rogers Jr., who would later be known as Dusty. Tragically, Arlene died suddenly after giving birth. Her death left Roy devastated. He was now a widower with 3 young children to care for. He had the money and fame that came with being one of America's biggest Western stars, but none of that could remove the reality of losing his wife and suddenly having to raise a family without her. Dale understood something about his situation that many people around him probably could not. She knew what it meant to be young, responsible for a child, and forced to keep moving forward after a relationship had fallen apart. She had been a teenage mother herself. She knew the fear of not knowing how the bills would be paid and the pressure of having a child depending on her. Because of that shared experience, Dale became increasingly involved in Roy's family life. What began as a professional relationship slowly became something much more personal. Dale spent time with Roy and his children, and the two developed a deeper connection. They had both experienced difficult family situations, although in very different circumstances. Roy had lost his wife, while Dale had experienced abandonment and had spent years raising Tommy alone. Their relationship developed quickly, but it was not simply based on Hollywood attraction. They were also building trust at a time when both had experienced serious loss. By 1947, Roy was ready to make their relationship permanent. His proposal was anything but private. According to accounts of their relationship, Roy proposed to Dale while sitting on his famous horse, Trigger, shortly before entering a rodeo arena in Chicago. Thousands of people were present, making the moment especially memorable. Dale said yes. On December 31, 1947, Roy Rogers and Dale Evans were married. For Dale, the marriage represented much more than becoming the wife of a famous cowboy. She was joining a family that already included Roy's 3 children. She became a mother figure to Cheryl, Linda Lou, and Roy Jr., while Roy accepted Tommy as part of his own family. That acceptance was especially important to Dale. For years, Hollywood had forced her to hide the fact that Tommy was her son. Now, she could finally acknowledge him publicly, without pretending he was her younger brother. After everything she had sacrificed for Tommy, being able to openly say, "This is my son," meant a great deal. The family continued to grow. Roy and Dale eventually adopted several more children, including Mimi from Scotland, Dodie, Sandy, and Debbie. Their household became large and complicated, with children coming from different backgrounds but becoming part of the same family. For Dale, this seemed to offer something she had wanted for most of her life, a stable family. She had spent her childhood feeling disconnected from the people around her. She had become a mother before she was old enough to fully understand adulthood. She had been abandoned by her first husband and had worked hard to build a career while raising her son. Now, she had a husband who accepted her child, children of her own to care for, and a home filled with family. From the outside, everything looked almost perfect. Roy Rogers was America's beloved cowboy. Dale Evans was his glamorous and talented partner. Together, they became one of Hollywood's most recognizable couples. Their professional partnership continued to grow, and audiences loved seeing them together. But the public only saw part of their lives. Behind the cameras, there were responsibilities, disagreements, parenting challenges, long periods apart, and the enormous pressure of raising a large family while maintaining 2 successful careers. The couple's public image would eventually become much more complicated than the happy picture their fans knew. And as their family grew, Dale would discover that marriage to America's favorite cowboy came with problems she could not simply smile away. The children who changed everything. In 1950, Dale Evans experienced one of the happiest moments of her life. She was pregnant with her first and only biological child, with Roy Rogers. After everything she had already been through, becoming a mother again seemed like the beginning of another hopeful chapter for their growing family. Their daughter, Robin Elizabeth Rogers, was born that year, but almost immediately, Roy and Dale learned that Robin had Down syndrome and serious health problems. At the time, attitudes toward children with Down syndrome were very different from what many people understand today. In the 1950s, there was widespread ignorance about the condition, and many families were encouraged to keep children with disabilities away from public view. Some parents were even told that their children should be placed in institutions rather than raised at home. Hollywood created another problem. Dale was a major celebrity, and she and Roy were building a carefully controlled public image. They were supposed to represent wholesome American family life. There were people around them who believed that having a child with a disability could hurt that image. The advice was simple: keep Robin private. But Dale and Roy refused. They chose to raise Robin as part of their family and did not treat her as something that needed to be hidden. Dale especially became deeply devoted to her daughter. She spoke about Robin openly and made it clear that her child was loved and valued. This decision was significant because Dale had already experienced what it meant to have Hollywood control the story of her family. Years earlier, she had been forced to pretend that Tommy was her brother instead of her son. She knew what it felt like when the entertainment industry decided which parts of her personal life were acceptable for the public to see. She was not going to let that happen to Robin. But Dale did not get much time with her daughter. Robin died in 1952 before she reached her second birthday. For Dale, the loss was devastating. She had already experienced abandonment, failed relationships, financial struggles, and the pressure of raising a child alone. She had finally built the large family she had always wanted, only to lose her daughter far too soon. This time, however, Dale did not want to remain silent. She turned to writing. In 1953, she published Angel Unaware, a deeply personal book about Robin's short life and death. What made the book unusual was that Dale presented the story largely through an imagined voice of Robin, allowing the child to describe her own brief experience of life. It was an intensely personal decision. Dale was not simply writing about losing a child. She was trying to give Robin a voice and explain why her daughter's life had mattered despite being so short. The response was enormous. Parents of children with disabilities wrote to Dale and shared their own experiences. Many had spent years dealing with shame, isolation, misunderstanding, or pressure to keep their children out of public view. Dale's willingness to discuss Robin publicly gave many of those families someone they could relate to. Her grief was becoming part of a larger conversation. Instead of allowing Robin's death to remain a private tragedy, Dale used the experience to encourage people to look differently at children with disabilities. Her public openness also became an important part of how she dealt with her own grief. At the same time, the Rogers-Evans family continued to grow. Roy and Dale adopted several children, including Debbie, who became another important member of their large family. Their household eventually included children from different backgrounds and circumstances. Raising so many children required enormous time, energy, patience, and organization. And Dale carried much of that responsibility while maintaining her own career. This was happening just as Roy and Dale's professional success was reaching another level. From 1951 to 1957, The Roy Rogers Show became a major television program. Families across America watched Roy, Dale, and their supporting cast every week. Dale was not simply standing beside Roy as his wife. She was an important part of the show herself. She sang, acted, rode horses, and had her own identity as an entertainer. The program presented the two of them as an ideal Western couple who shared the same values and worked together as a family. That was the image millions of viewers knew, but their private lives were far more demanding. Behind the television cameras, Roy and Dale had a large family to raise. There were children who needed attention, household responsibilities, career commitments, travel, and the emotional difficulties that came with losing children and dealing with serious family problems. Dale's frustrations with Roy were therefore not simply about romance or whether they loved each other. They were also about parenting. They were about how the children were raised, how strict Roy could be, and how much responsibility fell on Dale when Roy was away for work. His career required travel and appearances, while Dale often had to remain closely involved with the children and the household. The public saw Roy and Dale smiling together on television. They heard them sing and watched them present an image of family happiness. Dale, however, knew how much work existed behind that image. She loved Roy, but she could also become frustrated with him. She could be grateful for the family they had built while feeling overwhelmed by the responsibilities that came with it. She could admire his career while resenting the amount of time it took him away from home. And after losing Robin, those pressures carried even more emotional weight. The family that gave Dale so much happiness also brought some of the deepest pain of her life, and the next tragedy would make everything even harder. The Roy Rogers Dale Evans fans never saw. This is where the story of Dale Evans and Roy Rogers becomes much more complicated. The word hate can make their relationship sound much simpler than it really was. Dale did not simply hate Roy, and there is no reason to suggest that she spent their marriage wanting to leave him. Their relationship lasted for more than 50 years. There was clearly love, loyalty, and deep attachment between them. But love does not mean a person is never angry. Dale could love Roy and still resent parts of their marriage. She could be grateful for the family they created while feeling exhausted by the responsibilities that came with it. She could admire his career while becoming frustrated with the amount of time that career took him away from home. That difference matters when trying to understand what Dale's private life may have been like. Roy's public image was extremely strong. To millions of Americans, he was the friendly and honorable cowboy who represented kindness, courage, family, and good values. The Roy Rogers Show reinforced that image every week. Viewers saw Roy as a dependable husband and father, and Dale as the woman happily standing beside him. But being a beloved television personality did not automatically make someone a perfect husband or father. According to accounts of their family life, Roy could be very strict with the children. He had strong ideas about discipline and expected the children to follow his rules. For a father raising a large family, having rules and standards was understandable. But from Dale's position as the person deeply involved in the daily care of the children, those expectations could create additional pressure. Their family was not small. Roy and Dale were raising their biological and adopted children, including children who had already experienced difficult circumstances. Each child had different needs, personalities, and emotional experiences. Keeping such a large family organized required constant attention. Dale was not only a mother, she was also an actress, singer, wife, and public figure. At the same time, Roy's career kept him busy. Tours, performances, rodeos, filming, public appearances, and other professional commitments regularly demanded his attention. His work was the reason he was so famous, but it also meant that there were periods when Dale had to manage the family without him. That kind of absence can be difficult even when there is no major argument between a husband and wife. Sometimes the problem is simply that one person is carrying responsibilities while the other is somewhere else. The person at home still has to deal with the children, the household, unexpected problems, and the emotional needs of the family. For Dale, this could create loneliness. And there was another reason she could not simply complain about her marriage publicly. Roy Rogers was Roy Rogers. He was one of America's most beloved entertainers. Criticizing him could have affected not only their personal relationship, but also the carefully built public image that surrounded both of their careers. The two of them were presented as an ideal couple. Millions of people wanted to believe that Roy and Dale were exactly what they appeared to be. They were successful, married, religious, family-oriented entertainers who seemed to share the same values. Their songs, television appearances, and public events reinforced that impression. Dale had very little reason to destroy that image while Roy was alive. So if she experienced anger, exhaustion, disappointment, or loneliness, much of it remained private. Her earlier experience with Tommy also made the situation more complicated. Before Roy, Hollywood had forced Dale to hide the truth about her own son. Tommy was her child, but the public was told he was her brother. She had spent years living with that lie because she believed refusing could damage her career. Even after she was finally able to acknowledge Tommy as her son, she could not simply erase those years. The experience had shown Dale that Hollywood could interfere with something as personal as the relationship between a mother and her child. It also meant that the public version of her life was not always the real version. That distinction became important throughout her marriage to Roy. Dale was a woman of strong faith, and faith played a major role in how she understood both happiness and suffering. But being a person of faith did not mean she never became angry or exhausted. It did not mean she never questioned why painful things happened to her family. She lost Robin. She later lost Debbie. She carried the responsibilities of a large family. She dealt with the demands of a major entertainment career, and she lived with a husband whose own career frequently kept him away. None of those experiences automatically meant that her marriage was unhappy, but they did mean that her life was much more complicated than the cheerful television image suggested. This is the important part of Dale and Roy's story. Dale did not have to stop loving Roy in order to become frustrated with him. She could love the man who accepted Tommy. She could love the father of their family. She could love her husband of more than 5 decades. And at the same time, she could resent his absence, disagree with his parenting style, feel overwhelmed by responsibilities, and wish that he had been more present during difficult periods. Those feelings can exist together. The problem was that the public rarely got to see that side of Dale. They saw the famous cowgirl. They saw the singer. They saw Roy's wife. They saw the mother who appeared to have everything under control. They did not always see the woman behind those roles. And after another devastating loss struck the Rogers-Evans family, keeping those private feelings buried would become even harder. Debbie's death broke open old wounds. By 1964, Dale Evans and Roy Rogers had already experienced more family tragedy than most parents could imagine. They had lost their daughter Robin more than a decade earlier, and Dale had spent years trying to live with that grief while continuing to raise their large family. Then another tragedy struck. Their adopted daughter, Debbie, was only 12 years old when she died in a church bus accident in 1964. Her death was sudden and completely unexpected. There was no long illness preparing the family for what was coming. One moment, Debbie was a young girl going about her normal life. Then she was gone. For Dale, that difference mattered. Robin's death had also been devastating, but Robin had been seriously ill from the beginning of her life. Dale and Roy knew that their daughter had significant health problems. They had spent time caring for her and understood that her condition was dangerous. Debbie's death gave them no such warning. There was no time to prepare emotionally. There was no final period when Dale could slowly accept that she might lose another child. Instead, the family had to deal with a sudden loss that made no sense to them, and that often creates a different kind of grief. After an accident, parents can find themselves asking questions that have no answers. Why did this happen? What if she had not gotten on the bus? What if someone had done something differently? What if the family had made another decision that morning? Dale struggled with those kinds of questions. She had already experienced the pain of losing Robin. Now she was facing the death of another child, this time in a completely unexpected way. The emotional burden was enormous for both Dale and Roy. They had to mourn Debbie while still being parents to the children who remained. That was one of the hardest parts. Dale could not simply stop being a mother because she was grieving. There were still children who needed her attention, meals that had to be prepared, responsibilities that had to be handled, and a family that had been shaken by the loss. The tragedy also placed additional pressure on the marriage. Roy and Dale were both grieving, but people do not always grieve in the same way. Two parents can experience exactly the same loss and still respond very differently. One may want to talk about it constantly, while the other may become quiet. One may want to stay surrounded by family, while the other may want to be alone. For a couple already carrying years of responsibility, career pressure, parenting challenges, and earlier losses, another tragedy could make existing frustrations harder to manage. Eventually, Roy and Dale decided to leave their home at Chatsworth Ranch. The family moved to the Double Bar R Ranch in Apple Valley, California, hoping that a new environment would give them a chance to begin again. The decision made sense emotionally. Their old home had become filled with painful memories. Leaving gave them a physical change at a time when they desperately needed something to feel different. But moving could not undo what had happened. Robin was still gone. Debbie was still gone. The grief followed them. And so did the other problems that had existed inside the marriage. Roy's career still required his time and attention. Dale still carried enormous responsibilities as a mother. The family still had to function, even while 2 children were missing from it. Something inside Dale was changing. For years, she had been known as the cheerful cowgirl who seemed to have an answer for everything. She sang about faith, family, happiness, and hope. She smiled beside Roy and helped maintain the wholesome image that millions of Americans admired. But after losing 2 children, Dale became increasingly willing to speak honestly about pain. Her writing and public appearances began to include more discussion of grief, loneliness, doubt, and the difficult parts of faith. She no longer seemed interested in pretending that believing in God meant life would always be easy. She could believe deeply and still hurt. She could have faith and still have questions. She could love her family and still admit that some days were extremely difficult. That honesty also changed the way people could understand her relationship with Roy. He was still her husband. She continued to stand beside him, work with him, and share her life with him. But their marriage could no longer be viewed only through the romantic image created by Hollywood. They had experienced too much together. They had raised a large family. They had lost children. They had dealt with career demands and long periods apart. Dale had carried responsibilities that sometimes left her exhausted, while Roy's own approach to family life could frustrate her. The years had changed both of them. Dale's pain did not automatically mean she stopped loving Roy. In fact, the two feelings could exist at the same time. She could remain deeply devoted to him, while also recognizing the loneliness and frustration she had experienced during their marriage. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more untold stories behind Hollywood's biggest legends.